Certainly to be scared has been part of human nature since its very beginnings.
What Alien says about us now are those fears that we have, which may be those fears that show up when we're dreaming, the nightmares.
I think he took a lot of techniques from Alfred Hitchcock in the sense that you don't really see everything. The imagination is used, and I think that's what made it so terrifying.
I think once you're making a movie, you better keep that pressure on all the way through. On anything, actually. But God knows on a thriller, or God knows it's a marathon of tension.
I've gone to films my whole life since I was a kid. I mean, I loved movies, and intuitively I knew that it was a thing I wanted to do more than anything. But the raising I had, my background, didn't suggest that that was a practical thing to do for a living.
I was a theater arts major in college. I wasn't a film major at UCLA. And I did love theater, but I realized after a while, after producing a couple of plays, that I had to stay in New York because that's where the investors are. And I hated the weather so much that the closest thing to theater was film. And I grew up in LA, so I decided, the hell with that. I'm not going to live in that freezing cold. I'll go into film.
I applied to USC, NYU, UCLA. NYU, UCLA blew me off. USC accepted. So I came out there, and I was a student in the USC Department of Cinema. Met up with John Carpenter. John Carpenter started to do this master's thesis film, a science fiction movie. I got involved in it, and it grew out of hand. It finally got too big for a student movie, and so in the end, we ended up finding a way to put it into theaters. And instead of the most impressive student film ever made, we had the least impressive professional film ever made. A lot of things bothered me about Dark Star. We had an alien in it, which was a beach ball. It was our second try on that alien. I went away from Dark Star really wanting to do an alien that looked real. A couple of years down the line, I decided to do Dark Star as a horror movie instead of a comedy. And that was the germ of Alien.
We got to talking, I realized that Dan was a cinema student at USC, and it was in the process of making a kind of a spoof on 2001, a small film called Dark Star, and he was surprised to find that that was my secret love, was film, and particularly fantastic cinema always attracted me. So basically, I helped out on Dark Star.
I had heard about Dark Star, and somebody was telling me about these two brilliant young guys, and sci-fi was my love, really. I also like suspense, but I went to see Dark Star, and I spoke to Carpenter on the phone, and I spoke to Dan on the phone. But it seemed to me I just had a more rapport with Dan just from the phone conversations, and I told him I had the rights to what became Total Recall, which was the original story by Phil Dick, was called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. So he knew the story. He said, I love that. Yeah, he said, you got the rights to that? I said, yeah. He said, okay, and I got something I got to discuss with you that I have been working on about a year, and I need to make a breakthrough. And maybe you're the guy that can make me have it happen. And that turned out to be Alien.
I had this opening. I didn't know where it was going to go. I knew I wanted to do a scary movie on a spaceship with a small number of astronauts. Like I say, Dark Star is a horror movie instead of a comedy. And I had this creepy opening in which astronauts awaken to find that their voyage home has been interrupted. They're receiving a signal from this mysterious planetoid in an alien language. They go down to investigate. They get stalled down there. Their ship breaks down.
He said, I've got 29 pages written, but I don't know you. I can't trust you to leave the house with this. The story, I, of course, know, and you have nothing written in the story. I said, no, I've just got the rights to the story. I hadn't yet tried to write it yet. And he said, okay, will you sit here and just read this? And this is what I got. And I'm stuck on it, frankly, but read this. So I sat there and I read it, and it was very close to what we actually ended up with on the screen, those first 29 pages.
The threat at the center of the story, whatever this monster or thing or danger was going to be. It was not at all clear to me at this point.
The first act is fantastic. I said, well, you know, possibly, maybe I can help you with it. And he said, okay, I can help you in Total Recall. So we decided, however, that we would tackle Alien first because Total Recall would be way more expensive because at that time we envisioned Alien could be a Roger Corman movie just in one location, you know, several different rooms in an old warehouse.
A Chilean filmmaker named Alejandro Jodorowsky telephoned me from Paris. Was it Paris, France? Or Paris, Texas? No, Paris, France. He had made an art film called El Topo, which was very well received. And this man, over this transatlantic phone line, claimed that he had the backing and the rights to make a feature film of Dune.
And he loved Dan's work that he did on designing the special effects for Dark Star. And he knew he had to do it at a budget with some creative people. So he hired Dan to work on it, help him with the storyline and also with the special effects. And Dan went off within a few weeks. He went off to Paris and France and places and was working on the Dune project there for 6 months.
And I wasn't the only person there. He had gone to England and he had plucked up an artist who did covers for science fiction books named Christopher Foss. And for the first time, I saw somebody whose stuff I liked as much as Ron Cobb's stuff. He had another artist he wanted me to meet. He had seen this guy's work in a show that was in Paris at the time. Took me over to one of the really fancy hotels in Paris, not the one I was staying in, where this artist named Hans Rudi Giger was staying while his show was on display in Paris. Giger brings out this little tinfoil. He said, "Would you like some opium?" I said, "Why do you take that?" He said, "I am afraid of my visions." He said, "It's only your mind." He said, "That is what I'm afraid of." He brings out a book, art book, with his paintings in it. I started looking at this, and he and Alejandro go into a big discussion about Dune. I started looking at these paintings, and it took a minute for it to register what I was seeing, but what I was seeing seemed to be very disturbing.
Oft-told story of that was Dan, of course, working on the Jodorowsky Dune in Paris for a year or two, and it all collapsed, and he went home with no money and whatever it is, and slept on Ron Shuset's couch.
And I was in desperation. The only thing I could think to do, I had to sell a script.
So he said, now light up the board, Ron. I've got this first act, and you like it. And he says, I know, you have a good mind from these just weeks and weeks I've worked with you before I left, and what I saw you did on Total Recall, which you did the short story. As far as you got it, I know you can make the breakthrough for me.
Well, Star Beast is one of those titles that you think of, and then you throw them away. I was running through titles, and they all stank. I didn't like any of them. One morning at 3 o'clock, Ronnie's apartment, I'm typing away, writing dialogue, and the characters are saying the alien this and the alien that, and suddenly that word alien just sort of came up out of the typewriter at me. I said, alien. It's a noun and it's an adjective. I said, yes, that's it. I have the title.
It's simple. It's one word, and no one's ever used it. And never changed from that moment on. No one ever tried. The title stuck, and that was amazing to us, even just that aspect of it.
I went to storage, got my typewriter out, took it over to Ronnie Shuset's living room, and wrote it up. Over the days and nights of the next 3 months, Ron keeping me alive by feeding me hot dogs.
Dan said, somehow the monster has to get on board the ship in a way that'll amaze everybody. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, Dan, I have an idea. And he said, what? And I said, the monster screws one of the people. He says, what? What are you talking about? I said, he jumps in his face, plants a tube down him, inserts his seed in him, and later it comes bursting out of his stomach. And Dan goes, oh my God, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. And we just sat up all night and we wrote, and in 3 weeks, we had I would say, which is 85% of the plot, the structure. We didn't write the screenplay right there of what you saw became Alien, 85%.